It's happened, our very first Victoria dev diary. Now, I will be releasing a Victoria 3 video tomorrow. I had actually intended to do it today, but then I saw this dev diary, so I figured I would cover that. This whole news about pops or population. Now, in my typical fashion, I'm just going to quickly upfront this knowledge. If you're familiar with Stellaris or any other game that uses pops as a means of, I guess, common nomenclature, right? Well, it started in Victoria and it is carried on into games like Stellaris. It's pretty much explaining how that works for Victoria 3. It's just a really quick little video here where we're going to bang through this dev diary, but essentially the way that pops work is that they are going to generate your population, and they will also look at your workforce, your dependents, which are people that are dependent upon, well, you guessed it, your workforce, such as in the early portions of the game, this would be like women, especially this is very indicative of the time in the Victorian era and their kind of position in society. But it also goes into how each and every pop in the game is represented visually, so you can actually see what these nondescript numbers look like. So that's just a really quick little crash course of what we're going to be covering here today. I just wanted to give anyone who wanted to know what this is just a real quick primer before we get into it. You can head out if you so wish, but for those who want to look more into the dev diary of pops, let's get a going here. So this is not as big of a dev diary as Crusader Kings 3, and it's logically so, right? This game is still in its alpha stages, hasn't even hit beta. And in the video tomorrow, I'll be discussing possible release dates that we might be seeing, but we're probably looking at about a year out, if not a little bit more, if we look at stuff like Crusader Kings 3 and Empire of Sin. But for pops themselves, like I was saying, you know, pop mechanics have since snuck into other Paradox titles like Stellaris and Imperator, and it's pretty much just an in-depth breakdown of how they're doing pops in this game. But in Victoria 3, pops are the country's engine. They work the industries, they pay the taxes, they operate the government institutions, and they fight the wars. They're born, they die, they change occupation, they migrate, and they organize, get angry, and start revolutions. So you can see here that each pop is visualized so you can see which demographic sports the best mustachio. Note that pop portraits are very much a work in progress right now. So you can see here that this is the French Catholic clergyman, representative of this population. And guys, please, I'm going to be putting up this video. I know One Proud Bavarian will be putting up a video. There's one thing that I don't know about Victoria is I've never played Victoria 1 or 2. I will be playing Victoria 2 to get a better idea of this, but if you want direct breakdowns of how these mechanics probably break out in from 2 into 3, please check out One Proud Bavarian. He has like 50,000 subscribers. He deserves 500,000. The guy is awesome. So please go check his channel out. I'm sure he'll have a more mechanical breakdown for you guys. But you, the player, might be in charge of the country, but you're not in charge of the pops and can't manipulate them directly. And I assume that you can't manipulate them directly to start, because this is a Paradox game. And what Paradox game would be a Paradox game if you don't have disgusting amounts of control over little tiny things that you never thought you would want to have control over, i.e. Stellaris purging a planet. But a Galactic Imperium aside, a large part of the game will consist of you trying to sate your population's appetites for material goods or political reforms. And really how pops kind of play into the game mechanics and your nation is that they are going to fill up your professions, or the people that are pretty much going to produce goods for you and thus invest those goods into things. So the most important aspect of pops are their professions, which reflect the types of jobs it carries out in the building where they work. A pop's profession determines its social class, its wages, its political strength, what other professions it might qualify for, and particularly which political interest group it's prone to supporting. So this is all kind of, again, very indicative of the times. When you look at Victorian era, it's more, when you think Victorian era, you think of a time in history, and it's really because of England, right? That Victorian era of England because of Queen Victoria, who reigned from 1837 to 1901. The real Victorian era is like 1815 to 1915, more or less. It's called the British century, as it were. And the big defining characteristics of that century are social class, your wage. These things make up who you are, and including your sex and your race. These things are important for the era that we're taking a look at, because that kind of determines the laws that bind you. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. So some of the pop professions you will encounter in Victoria 3 are aristocrats, capitalists, bureaucrats, officers, shopkeepers, machinists, laborers, and peasants. Remember, this is the beginning of one of the first actual industrial revolutions that happens towards the later portions of the 1800s. So that's going to play a huge part in this, obviously, because that's the Victorian era. But every variation of profession, culture, religion, and workplace in the world gets its own unique pop. At any given time, this results in many tens of thousands of pops in the world working, migrating, procreating, and agitating. So here's an example of aristocrats in the Ottoman Empire. So what I find pretty cool about this is, it says wealthy landowners, old money with old connections. As owners of farms and plantations, they contribute some of their profits to the investment pool. Their political interests are represented as the landowners. So obviously we'll get these pops in their political interests. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, right? But we'll also get an idea of how these individual professions contribute into what, right? See, they contribute some of their profits to the investment pool. I would assume that certain groups, certain professions contribute their profits to other pools. And maybe there's some sort of diversity here where you want to have, okay, hey, having too much of, say, investment pool with not enough of, I don't know, infrastructure pool makes it so that your market access isn't high enough. Even though you have high investment, the investment can't go into anything because there's no market to take advantage of. I bet you have to constantly balance those kind of pools and how that has to work against each other, or these individual professions and how they'll kind of play in line. I'm sure there's going to be a kind of, not a rock, paper, scissors to it, but hey, X percentage of this population will result in displeasure from this population. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of balancing on a, not a fine-tooth comb, because you don't balance on those. You balance on a razor's edge, because that's the term I'm looking for. But I'm sure it's going to be something like that, just like you get in every other Paradox game when it comes to these diverse populations. But you get an idea of their culture, religion, their literacy, which is important here. I know that's going to be something that's going to really kind of come into the game in a big way. Discrimination, net income, political strength, interest groups. Looks like they have interest groups in agriculture. Loyalists and radicals, if any. So you get a nice breakout here. Aristocrats in the Ottoman Empire support local governors, armed forces, and Sunni I'm sorry, I'm just not even going to try. I just butchered that so bad, so I apologize to anyone who does know that word. But aristocrats in the Ottoman Empire, population, the political strength, and only pops with adequate wealth can become aristocrats. Potential increases with greater wealth and, to a lesser degree, literacy. Pops whose culture faces discrimination take a much longer time. Officers and bureaucrats have a particularly easy time becoming aristocrats. So it's probably, again, just like we see with stuff like Stellaris, right, where you've got specialized populations and you've got those 3 tiers of population where it goes from like the very bottom tier to more skilled labor to administrative. So it's probably going to be something very similar to that. The people that make up a pop are distinguished into workforce and dependents. Members of the workforce keep the buildings of the game operational and collect a wage from them in return. Those who cannot or aren't permitted to be officially employed are considered dependents. They collect only a small income from odd jobs and government programs. So like I was saying earlier about the time and the era and what was considered right, that's a big thing. Is the Victorian era is kind of marked by certain consistency that was instated by law, by rule, and this was considered social decorum. These things happened because this is the way that we keep a stable government, a stable empire. I mean, in 1837 to 1901, there is one single British monarch. There's something like 8 German kings. There's something like 10, or that's whatever, how many divided by 4, X amount of US presidents. Like, there is a ton of turmoil in the world, but there is a lot of consistency within Britain. And that, again, kind of makes up the backbone of the Victorian era. So that's why you have these laws who affect who is included in each category. So dependent pops will enter the workforce over time. So again, at the start of the game, most countries do not accept women working and collecting wage outside the home, but you can reform those laws to change that. Also by abolishing child labor. I put child labor in red because it's bad. We shouldn't want to do it. But I know we're playing a Paradox game, and I know people are going to have a child labor empire because you guys are sadistic. But the amount of income dependents bring home will decrease, but will make it easier to educate your populace, increasing their overall literacy. Again, a game mechanic that we know is probably going to have a lot of bearance on your government and furthering of other things such as maybe general population pleasure, or even, you know, discontent. You know, maybe an illiterate populace will be more apt to accept bad things versus good things because they just don't understand it. Who knows? I'm sure that's a Victoria 2 mechanic that I just don't know about personally. But after a bloody war, many dependents of soldiers may be left without sufficient income, and you may decide to institute pensions to help your population. So a lot of different control over how to help your population. How to put dependents into the workforce, how to remove dependents from your workforce, or how to maybe institute pensions and the such. But in short, nothing in your country runs without pops. So that is the kind of quick little breakdown of populations here today. They've said in the next dev diary, they're going to be going into capacities, and I will be talking about some of the other Victoria 3 stuff from the PDXCon tomorrow, and going into a little historical primer before that. But again, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Go ahead and let me know what you're most excited about with Victoria 3. As I've been saying, I'm going to be playing Victoria 2 this summer, so let me know, hey, try this nation out. It's a little bit different of a playthrough, but it's a lot of fun. Give me some tips. Give me some things that you say, hey, this is what I enjoyed the most when I was playing Victoria 2. Try this. And I'll definitely put it through its paces so that I can get ready for Victoria 3 and make an unlimited amount of guides, because that's what I just love doing for some reason. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Please, please, please don't forget to check out One Proud Bavarian, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe below. But as always, guys, have a good one and take care.